Welcome everyone, and thanks for coming to Writing the Land, Communicating Conservation Through Poetry. I'm McLoughlin, Director of the Writing the Land Project, and I hope to have soon with me Sophi Veltrop, Outreach Manager for Northeast Wilderness Trust, NEWT, who is participating in both the 2021 and 2023 project years, and our very first land trust to sign up. Thank you. And two of our 215 poets from the project, Kathy Kremins and Sylvia Karman, who have both written lands for NEWT, and whose work is part of our 2021 anthology. So we would like to ease into our session with some poetry, which is the focus of our work. So I'm going to turn it over to our poets. Then Sophi will talk about using poetry to communicate conservation from her perspective as a land trust outreach manager. And then I'll jump in with some practical information. And at the end, we've made a space for a tiny little poetry break in the middle of your day. And so now, poets Kathy Kremins and Sylvia Karman.
Good morning, everyone. I read today from the occupied territory of the Lenape people of the Munsee language. Hum a home. Much is made of late winter light, how the angle of March sun darkens the sky into azure blue. So diving into the pine forest splashes solitude reflected off of Muddy Pond. On next visit, spring will perform her symphony, opening sonata accompanied by toads, frogs, insects, salamanders in vernal pools, then andante, gentle emergence, wildflowers, painted turtles. But today, long shadows of winter are my companions, the sounds of my boots on fallen needles, pine cones, rocks, mud, oak leaves under stubborn snow. The pond glimmer stops me, frozen with stillness, then the beating of my heart, rhythm of my breath. When you hear the quiet, don't fill it with words or noise. Let the geese call and the wind answer. Gather the notes inside where silent nature hums a home. I'm Kathy Kremins, and I am a Newark, New Jersey urban landscape kid, born and raised there. I am a retired New Jersey public school teacher and adjunct professor. I have MFA from Goddard College, a Doctor of Letters from Drew University, and I have a number of academic publications, but my poetry chapbook, Undressing the World, is coming out from Finishing Line Press in June of 2022. And I'm a 2021 Writing the Lands poet. And a little bit about how that came to be. Luckily, a former colleague of mine, David Cruz, was working with Lise at the very beginning of this project. And he reached out to me. He said, I think this is up your alley. I said, you're absolutely right. And got in touch with Lise. And as I looked at the choices of lands at that point, one of the things that stood out for me, being a Jersey kid, was Muddy Pond in Kingston, Massachusetts, for two reasons. One, the Pine Barrens, Pine Barrens being certainly an important and significant part of the New Jersey landscape, the southernmost part, and then the northernmost part being located up in Muddy Pond. The other plus for me was that my best friend from high school lives in Plymouth, and Muddy Pond is 5 minutes away from her house. And for me, it was a matter of, I wanted a relationship with this land. And certainly the first time that I went to Muddy Pond, and again, luckily, in the midst of a pandemic, I was able to go and stay with my friend and spend a week at Muddy Pond, going back and forth every day, taking photographs, listening very carefully, writing things down. And from that visit, as well as a few other visits, I came up with 3 poems, Hum a Home being one of them, for the 2021 anthology. The best part about this, and I keep saying this to Lisa all the time and thanking her, is there have been two things that have come out that for me personally will continue. One is that relationship with Muddy Pond and the listening and the learning, the photographs and writing of poems. I've written 4 other poems, being able to go to Muddy Pond at different times of the year. I actually was up there last weekend and it's very muddy. It was a wet trek. But that being able to, this is a land that will stay with me. It's become one of my special places. And then the other relationships with other poets. To be able to read again with Sylvia is an absolute joy. And the connections that I've made to the Writing the Lands community is one that will continue to resonate. So again, for me, poetry and the conservation of the lands is, and the relationships with other poets has been absolutely critical. So thank you for listening, and hand it over to Sylvia.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, everyone. My poem begins with an epigraph from Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And which goes like this. Imagine walking through a richly inhabited world of birch people, bear people, rock people. My poem, Hiking Eagle Mountain Wilderness. By what name do the trees know us? They speak in balsam scents. Their breezy brogues swish and creak. Birch and maple crowns cast sunlight coins that wink my name along the logging road, long surrendered, to pioneers whose seeds tag my sleeves and the wolfish drape of my shepherd mix's tail. They mark us chance in motion and settle on a giant's fist of till near a pond where the shepherd spies a beaver. Cianito le castor d'Albiba, Castor canadensis, whose gaze returns our marvel before he turns to ripples. Water covers him sleek and sleek, reflecting the mountain. Her south-facing ice-plucked cliffs shelter raptor nations. She extends her wild lap to the winged and mineraled, the rooted and roaming, to any call to wonder and become possibility. So as Kathy mentioned, my name is Sylvia Karman, and I just, good morning to everyone. And I'm very honored to have the opportunity to read my work at this event, especially with Kathy. And big thank you to everyone with Massachusetts Land Conservancy for the important work you do. I'm a writer who lives in northern New York and the Adirondacks. And for part of the year, I'm also in the Piedmont area of central Maryland. I'm outdoors almost daily. I love to hike and paddle, and I've been a hiker since forever. I mean, since I could walk. And so the wilderness finds its way into much of my prose and poetry. And I am happy to say that for the last couple years, I've been a contributing poet with Writing the Land. And I've had a great fortune to collaborate with the Northeast Wilderness Trust. And as Kathy had, David Cruz had brought me on board to the project. So that's my connection initially with it. Also, you can find my work in a number of literary journals, and currently I'm querying my first novel and I'm working on my second. I'm a retired public policy analyst, and I'm been able to turn toward the writing and land in a way that really um, lifts me and fills me, and I want to be able to share that experience. And that brings me to, my involvement with Writing the Land. As I said, I had another poet, David Cruz, who reached out to me. And so once I got involved, I visited Eagle Mountain Wilderness, which is the land I've adopted, or it's adopted me. For the first time, I went in fall of 2020 when we were all still in lockdown. So it was just wonderful to get there. This preserve is located in the northern foothills of the Adirondacks, and it is part of that geologically fairly young mountain range, which was created, I don't know, maybe a scant 5 to 10 million years ago. The preserve is a part of the ancestral lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka people, or the Mohawk Nation, as we call them. We hiked in, or when I hiked into Eagle Mountain Wilderness, I had taken what was at the time had been an old logging trail, and that led me to consider the history of the land and our relationship with it. Eagle Mountain Wilderness, I believe, has much to tell us about that relationship and how we can restore it. As part of my work as a writing land poet, I have visited this area numerous times. I'm eager to get back to it in another few weeks. So I've written poetry to capture it. I have 2 other poems that I had written that were also just reflect my experience with the land, and they're in the anthology. And I've also participated in a number of public readings with Kathy, which has been fabulous, and other fine Writing the Land poets. And some of these events have been sponsored by land trusts, such as this one. And I was also happy to participate in this past September in an event to open the Eagle Mountain Wilderness hiking trail to the public. And that was hosted by Northeast Wilderness Trust and supported by a number of local hiking and environmental organizations. So, I mean, it's just this being a part of Writing the Land as a writer, as a poet, and as, I don't know, as a novice naturalist, it really has given me far more than I feel I can probably ever give back. But as Kathy had mentioned, it's been just a wonderful growth opportunity for me to spend time with this land and to really try to bring forward what my experience has been there and what my questions are and what I'm learning, what the land is teaching me, and also just developing what I hope to be lifelong relationships with all of the people involved, especially the poets. And so I want for the relationship between me and wilderness to evolve and grow so that I can become a better human partner with this non-human world. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. Next up, we have Sophi Veltrop, who is Outreach Manager for Northeast Wilderness Trust, and she'll tell us how this works from her viewpoint.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Sophi. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's really nice to have you all in the room. It was lovely to hear your poems, Sylvia and Kathy. As Elise mentioned, I am the outreach manager at Northeast Wilderness Trust. And so I'll share a little bit about our land trust and why Writing the Land was such a good fit for us, and how we have employed that partnership to further our outreach and communications. So, Northeast Wilderness Trust is a regional land trust. I know most of this conference is focused in Massachusetts, and as you heard from Kathy, Muddy Pond Wilderness Preserve is based in Kingston, Massachusetts, in the Pine Barrens. We have one other small preserve that's protected, a salt marsh in Marion, Massachusetts, and we're working on some other projects there. But for the most part, the large component of the acreage that we've protected is in northern New England. So we work across New England and the Adirondacks. So from Eagle Mountain in the Adirondacks all the way over to Frenchman Bay near Acadia in Maine, and then all the way down to Northwest Connecticut. We protect land in this entire region. So we have a pretty broad scope, and I'll introduce you to some of the other properties that were featured with Writing the Land in a moment. We were founded in 2002, so we're celebrating our 20th anniversary, and we've protected 64,000 acres to date, and we're looking to protect a lot more. What Northeast Wilderness Trust specializes in is forever wild conservation, which focuses on lands that are not for extractive purposes. So they will never be logged, so that they can be shaped by natural disturbances over time and have evolution play out in a way that's shaped by nature itself rather than human impact, which is largely missing on the landscape. Right now, only 3% of the Northeast has been protected with wilderness level protections. So in addition to timber harvest, our lands don't allow motor vehicles, and there are some other aspects to that as well. The idea is that over time, in addition to the principle of lands being shaped by natural processes, these forests will regain their old growth characteristics. So some of the lands we've protected are mature forests that have sort of a jump start on getting to old forest status, and some of them are very young. Some of them have a very recent history of harvest on them, because that's most of what is present across the Northeast. So some of them are sort of starting from that toddler or teenage years, so to speak. And Northeast Wilderness Trust has made a commitment that these lands will be protected all the way until they reach their ancient forest potential and beyond. And we do this for both nature's sake and people. It gives me a lot of hope and reassurance that someday there might be an old growth forest near me that I can go visit. And I think that people across the Northeast should have that kind of access to view nature in all of its forms. And so the places that we protect, the places that we own, which is the majority of our properties, are all open to the public, but only a few of them are easy to access. And those we call our ambassador preserves, meaning that they have a parking area and more formal trails. And the other ones, we don't put a whole lot of emphasis on putting trails on them. And that gets into why Writing the Land is such a great partner. So in outreach and communications, I am trying to communicate to our audience, to our supporters, to the general public, why these lands are so special and what they feel like. And that can be really hard to do when the landscape is really far away, or it doesn't have a parking area and trails. Or in our instance, when we work across a really wide region where we might be trying to communicate to somebody in New York what a landscape in Maine looks and feels like. And so having these poems that represent a diversity of our landscape helps people who aren't maybe ever going to set foot on these lands get a sense of our work and get a sense of why these lands are special and what they feel like without actually having to go there, to travel far. So that's one reason why Writing the Land has been such a great fit for us. Another reason is that we try to de-emphasize like stuff, like promotional material. So we're not trying to make a bunch of like beanies or travel mugs. And so, but we still want to, thank our supporters and give something. We need gifts, and we need something to offer back to people who are supporting our mission. And poetry is a really wonderful way to do that. It's special, it's unique, it's enjoyable, and it's not creating more stuff in the world. And in my work of communicating about these lands, I'm often writing about the acreage, the natural communities that are protected, how we got the funding. It's a little drier. And something I love about the poems is that they really communicate the spirit of the land, which can be sometimes missed in our more traditional annual report and e-newsletters, where we only have so much space to communicate the factual information. So poetry is a way to connect people to the land in a much more emotional and personal way. And that also translates to being on the land itself, which I'll share in a moment. Yeah, okay. So I'll share. So what we're looking at right now is Woodbury Wilderness Preserve. So in addition to participating in Writing the Land in 2021 with Sylvia, Kathy, David Cruz, and Rachel Parker, those were our 4 poets who visited our 4 ambassador preserves across 4 different states. We will be participating in 2023, and our focus preserve for 2023 is the Woodbury Wilderness Preserve. I'm actually zooming you today from the foothills of Woodbury Mountain, which is pictured here. I live right below it, fortunately, and this is a nearly 6,000 acre preserve that Northeast Wilderness Trust bought at the end of 2021. We were able to purchase it. We're still fundraising to cover the stewardship and easement costs of that land. And so this will be our featured landscape. And we've got a local poet, Sean Prentice, who's going to be visiting it and writing poems about it. And so I'll also share a little bit about the 2 other ambassador landscapes whose poets are not here today, to give you a taste of the other lands that we protect. And that's Binney Wilderness Preserve and Alder Stream Preserve. Do we have some photos of those queued up?
No, sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, Binney Hill Wilderness Preserve is in New Hampshire. It protects an area along the Wapak Trail, which the Friends of the Wapak group that safeguards it and does trail management, they're celebrating their 50th anniversary. So it's a special landscape in that it has this long-term history of a 21-mile trail. I believe it was established by one of the founders of the Appalachian Trail, Benton McKay. And the Binney Hill Wilderness Preserve that Rachel Parker wrote about is 550 acres that Northeast Wilderness Trust owns, and then another 1,400 acres that are protected with a Northeast Wilderness Trust easement and owned by a private school. In Maine, we have Alder Stream Wilderness Preserve, which we've been, just like Binney Hill, we've been adding to over time. So this is one of our longest running preserves. It started out at about 1,000 acres and today is about 7,000 acres. So we really try and focus on an area and grow preserves so that we might start with a smaller amount and we try and make a larger connected landscape. And so I'll share with you a little bit about how Writing the Land has benefited Northeast Wilderness Trust and how I have used these poems to further our communications and donor relations. So I am constantly on the hunt for digital content. We have social media, we have a blog, I'm updating our website, and we have an e-newsletter. And so all of those digital media outlets I have used those to share the poems. And so those poems provided some great content for us to populate a bunch of social media posts, some blog posts, and share with people through our e-newsletter. And so these poems are reaching people who might have a very deep connection with Northeast Wilderness Trust and who might only have more of a tangential connection with us. They might follow us on a social media channel. So we're getting these out to a broad range of audience, and it's really helped me with having some really quality content to queue up. And with four different poets and 4 different landscapes, that made for a high volume of content, which was great. In addition, we celebrated these poems through events. So we've done 2 so far, and I foresee us being able to do more. One was a virtual event that happened at our Spring Speaker Series last year. So Sylvia and Kathy, along with David and Rachel, joined us for a virtual event, and we were able to share these poems with, it was about between 50 and 70 people, accompanied by some of the beautiful images you've seen today. So giving people this rich, immersive experience of sound, words, visuals, all coming together. We also recorded that event. So we were also able to put that up on our YouTube channel, and I believe our Facebook page as well. And that received further views and generated further content. The other event that we did was on the land. Sylvia mentioned it before. So Sylvia and David read at our ribbon cutting for our new trail at Eagle Mountain Wilderness Preserve. And I'm sure you've been to a similar event where there's a little celebration of the protection of a land or something like that. And you've got the usual remarks by people of, thank you to such and such funder, and we're so honored to be here. And so we had all of that, but having the poetry to add a layer to that was just really made it really special, and really rounded out the event in a lovely way. And I can tell you that when the audience was listening, it was just complete silence, and everybody was, completely in tune. And to hear these poems on the landscape where they were written was a pretty cool experience. And I hope we can do more of those in the future. So those were the events that the poems were associated. And then finally, I'm sure you've heard of the anthology, and Lise will share more about that anthology with you in a moment. So these are the books that are created with all of the poems, not just the ones from Northeast Wilderness Trust, but from all of the other participating land trusts as well. And this is such a unique way to connect with people. Like I said before, we are always looking for ways to thank our donors and supporters in a really meaningful way that doesn't generate extra stuff unnecessarily. And so these books, we not only sold them through our website, so poets were able to refer their friends, and we shared it through our e-newsletter as a revenue generating source. So we sold, I think it was maybe 20 books, which was great, little fundraiser. And then we shared these books with our planned givers. So those planned givers got a book all to themselves as a thank you at the end of this past year. It was a really lovely extra little touch, and the foreword was written by Tom Butler, who works for Northeast Wilderness Trust, and so he signed it with a little note on the inside, and we got such lovely feedback from people. They really enjoyed it. They were really surprised and touched by how personal this gift was and how it conveyed the lands to them, because these are people who have, for planned giving, committed a large gift to Northeast Wilderness Trust in their will. That's a pretty substantial commitment, but often they don't get to see all the different landscapes that their gift is going towards protecting. And so being able to share 4 very different landscapes with 4 different voices to them was a special way to connect them with the work that they're supporting in a way that they might not have otherwise been able to meet these lands, essentially. So that is how we've used Writing the Land. It's been a really fun project. I've been really grateful to be involved. And I will pass it back to Lise to share with you a little bit more about the mechanisms of righting the land. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sophie. It's been great working with you and Newt, and I appreciate the extra effort in doing this presentation and everything. Thanks. So I'm Lise McLoughlin. I'm the founder and director of Writing the Land, and before our poetry break, I'll just fill in a few of the gaps with the origins and the goals of the project and how to become involved. And throughout, we'll have hints about how you can use poetry to communicate conservation. So here's the short version of how the project came into being. Before Writing the Land, there was Thinking the Land. Enjoyable, not quite efficacious. I live off-grid in a mature hemlock forest in Northfield, Massachusetts. And from here, for years, I contemplated the land. And as I walked around my acres with my favorite poet, Robert Frost, here's an example. We dance around in a ring and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows. So you can feel these cadences while you're hiking around and saying this in your head. And it really points out that words and the land write one another. So it occurred to me that in this way, land contributes to its own protection. Land speaks, and nature poets are trained to hear these voices. So what does that matter, said the activist in me. In a time when land needs all the help it can get just to survive, how can poets help the land we love protect itself? And so the answer is all of you, land trusts. Land trusts are the protectors of land. And so at that moment, Thinking the Land became Writing the Land. So Writing the Land is honored to be doing essential work for conserved lands. By pairing poets with protected lands, we offer ourselves as a conduit for the land to speak. And in addressing our love for the land through the art of poetry, we hope to reach people through emotion, memory, something less obvious than a direct appeal. If people lose themselves for a moment in the beauty of the poetic images, they connect deeply with the land even if they can't be there. So it's just one more way for humans to feel a thread that binds us to the land we love. And when they feel connected, then they are, as you know, more inclined and ready to protect it. So what we do is create anthologies that are sort of a hybrid. Each land trust has their own chapter in the anthology. This is our 2021, and these are the land trusts who participated. And the anthology is available through the land trusts only, so that it becomes hopefully a fundraising and outreach for them. Poets are centrally coordinated. We have about 215 poets nationwide, including 18 in Massachusetts. And we offer a selection of poets with a photo, a bio, and 3 example poems. So if we don't have one near you, we will recruit one. Or very often they travel, like the poets who are here today, they just found a land they love and keep going back to it. So it's kind of a nice match. The poets contribute by visiting the land and writing 3 poems that become part of the Land Trust chapter. Land trusts contribute other material to the chapter, like maps or mission statements and photos. So each chapter has poems, stuff from the Land Trust, and other stuff from the Land Trust. These poems are the creative core around which you can build your message. And each chapter becomes a reflection of the culture of the Land Trust and emphasizes the way you want to connect with your existing members and your future members. So hopefully these books are both outreach and fundraising for the Land Trust, They get the books at wholesale and resell at retail, and they also can sell tickets to an online book launch, which raises further money. Besides being published in the anthology, the poems can be used indefinitely for putting on your website, social media, newsletters, even play a little poem video at your annual meeting, or invite your poets to read, like Sophi has. So there are many ways that the poems can reach out to communicate conservation. The question I usually get at this point is how much. It does cost money, but hopefully not that much. This is a summary, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It's $250 is the first land, which includes your book chapter, a minimum of 25 free tickets to the online book launch, and as many books as you want at wholesale. You don't have to buy the books if you don't like the way they came out. We hope that they're useful to you to resell at retail, to give away as donor and volunteer or board gifts, and generally use however it makes sense for you for your outreach. And there's a stipend for your poet included in that. That's one of our goals, is to make sure poets are paid for the really important work that they're doing. In 2022, we have 4 anthologies coming out. Also in 2023, we have 4. And a space just opened up in one of the 2023 anthologies because one of our partners is considering having their own book. But mostly we're hoping that people will join us for 2023 turning over to 2024. So some things that I think make the project special and that you can use as ideas for your own poetry project, even if you don't join us, is one thing that we do is experiment. So most of our anthologies are collections of land trusts from across the country. In 2022, we have a different book called Foodways and Social Justice. It's a volume that contains sustainable farms, salmon habitat, the Rosa Parks Farmers Market, urban gardens, and essays about food, farmland, and justice. So these are essays, for example, from Hiram LaRue at Poets Ex Hunger, early CSA founder Scott Chasky, and Saka Yuvera and Stephanie Morningstar from Northeast Farmers of Color. Another chapter consists of organizations using the arts to bring attention to land conservation, such as Ag Arts and the Milk House. So this book is kind of a crossover, we hope, useful for book groups, classrooms, CSAs, as well as all the usual uses of our anthologies. In 2023, thanks to Rob Wade and his Learning Landscapes K-12 Leadership Project, 10 land trusts will have a poet teaching children to write poetry out on the land. So that will produce a book that focuses on kids and land, which will be very different for us. And we keep looking for ways to expand and use the arts to bring attention to the work that you do conserving land. Another way we're special is inclusion. 3 out of 4 of our anthologies for 2022 are half BIPOC poets. We disproportionately recruit and reward lands to Indigenous poets and poets of color. It's our goal to increase the diversity of voices speaking for the land, although that work will never be complete. It gains strength, depth, beauty, and energy from a multitude of voices. And third, I think a major advantage of the project is flexibility, because each land trust chooses what to put in their chapter, what to highlight. For example, one farm, one forest, one urban green space, or a property you're fundraising for, or a new initiative. So poetry can be really useful to emphasize your strengths, to recruit supporters, or expand into new territory. So while you could do this on your own, and I hope you do, I hope more people are going to be using poetry to communicate conservation. Our project exists to centrally coordinate poets, taking some of the administration off your shoulders and allowing your message to be spread more widely, to encourage more people across the country to think in new ways about connections with the land. So with 10 land trusts in each book, we kind of hope that there's a little bit of something for everyone. And finally, I'd like to thank our Massachusetts Land Trust project partners and those who have a presence in Massachusetts. Of course, Northeast Wilderness Trust, Mount Grace, Valley Community, Agrarian, New England Forestry Foundation, Hilltown, Sylvia Conti National Fish and Wildlife Refuge, Essex County Greenbelt, Northeast Farmers of Color, Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust. And thank you very much to the Massachusetts folks who blurbed the back cover of our 2021 anthology, Paul Catanzaro and Jen Plowden. So I just want to say thank you to all of you, as well as the poets. Doesn't work without poets. And I hope everyone will consider joining us for the 2023-2024 season. But even if you don't do poetry with our specific project, I do hope you've got some new ideas about how to use poetry to reach out and communicate conservation. Thank you. So I'll stop sharing screen so everyone can see each other. And we built in a little bit of time for questions so that your mind will be able to relax while we're doing the poetry exercise. So please feel free to ask any of us questions at this time. Either just unmute and go ahead and ask, or if you want to ask anonymously, you can use the chat. Thanks. I see.
Dan, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Unmute, I think you're on mute there.
I'm all set. Thank you. I don't specifically have a question, but I just would like to start a little bit of a dialogue. I see that we have 9 participants here, and you had a really tough slot on the schedule because a biomap 3 is something that most people really want to hear about. But I'm hoping that, you know, my colleagues in the conservation community will see these recordings after April 1st and come back to this presentation. So I just made a few notes, and if I could just say a few things about poetry and the observations of your work.
Please.
I know Liz from her writing the science page in the Montague Reporter.
That's right.
Sophi, I know her work as running the spring lecture series at Northeast Wilderness Trust, and I'm happy to meet the Kathy and Sylvia, the new poets today that I'm just learning about. I guess I want to say that, you know, poetry is a language, as you know, of love, and it can be of resistance. And so it's a language. And recently at the Massachusetts Open Space Conference, we had 2 researchers from the Harvard Forest, and they gave a presentation on does land conservation raise taxes? And it was a serious effort by economists to try to work on this issue and answer this question. And it's, you know, a very difficult paper to read. You just two pages summary is enough, but it's probably 70+ pages of most language that you can't understand. But one of the presenters, Alexi, in the Q&A said, well, you know, people speak different languages. So some people speak, you know, financial and money language in land conservation, or they understand and use ecosystem services. And that's what they can gravitate to. So I just like the love, resistance, and beauty, and as a starting point in poetry and around land conservation. I think about the poet Mary Oliver, and she has probably introduced the natural world to to more people around the world than probably any scientific publication could have, in my belief, because she's just reached so many people through her writings. And there's something magical about it. Kathy mentioned "Don't Fill the Silence," I think, in that first poem. And Barbara Bosworth, who was an artist in residence on the New England Trail several years ago, I heard her lecture a couple of times, and she talked about her dad and her as a child going out and to see the night sky. And they would go out at night and they knew the Big Bear and maybe a couple of other constellations. But then she said after that, the rest was theirs. They were just looking out onto the cosmos. She also conveyed that, she was out one time with a friend who was an educator with children, students, young students. And nowadays, all they want to do is get it right. So they were out there taking detailed notes about every constellation and about viewing the night sky, where like poetry just allows you to be in such a different place. So I just wanted to share that. I also wanted to say that Sophi has done a really spectacular job. Last year, when you had that author and illustrator from
Jackie Morris.
Yeah. What was her name?
Jackie Morris.
Jackie Morris. When that Jackie Morris was a life-saving experience during the depths of the pandemic. And then I guess the other thing was when you had Eileen Christ on that presentation. Of course, she's not a poet, which Sophi brought up this concept of, she's at the dinner table with friends and she thinks that she's the only one seeing the collapse of the world. And how do you deal that with friends at a dinner table conversation? And Eileen Christ said, well, you have to be careful around that because you don't want to alienate your friends or insult them. But she brought up this concept of reciprocity. And I mean, that was another life-changing idea for me, this idea of reciprocity that can be conveyed in poetry. We all can understand a reciprocal relationship. So I just want to end there for the moment and just say thanks for all the work you're doing. And I hope that poetry, which is obviously a lot different than the hard scientist and all the other work that needs to be done. And I want to say, Sylvia, it's wonderful that you've been able to move from a career in public policy, which is far from poetry, into poetry. So we can all do this. And it seems like it all needs to be done. It's kind of it's part of the puzzle. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know we have at least one. Amy, thank you for being here. Poet.
Oh, hi, Liz. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Your poetry has always been very inspiring to me, so I'm very grateful you're here.
Thank you so much. This is such a wonderful project, and it's been sort of at my periphery for a while, so I was really excited to see it on the schedule today. And I just started with Berkshire Natural Resources Council about a month ago. So, well, actually, I guess it's a little more than that. I'll certainly be bringing this up to them because I'm always trying to incorporate poetry into everything, right? Everything. I also was just curious, have you gotten grant funding, like local cultural council funding or from the MCC or anything like that?
No, we don't run on grants. We use the stipends that the land trusts put in, and we pay the poets with part of that, and then the rest of it goes to mostly software. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
InDesign is not a cheap cheap program, but yeah, no, we're holding our own very well, and we're just, you know, grateful to be able to pay the people who are actually making the art, which
Mhm.
to me is really important. You know, nobody asks somebody to come and do a wetland survey for free. I don't see why they should ask a poet to do it for free either. You know, like we're saying, it's just a different language, and it's an important part of describing the lands.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as a poet who's asked to do things like this all the time, I appreciate it.
No,
You know,
I'm great.
I had to have to go, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for this. And, you know, you might hear from me down the road a little bit.
Great. Well, thanks very much for coming.
Sure.
I'm gonna hand it back over to the poets for the poetry activity. So thank you, everybody.
So I guess we have our opportunity here, Kathy. So Kathy will be leading you all of us, in a guided meditation that involves writing a short poem and sharing the results if you would like to. But before Kathy begins, we'd like to share with you our intention for this meditation exercise. Cultural ecologist and geophilosopher David Abram wrote that climate change is the simple consequence of forgetting this mysterium in which we're bodily immersed. So it's our hope with this exercise that it would model a way to commune with the land, with the non-human world. Writing a poem, as you know, Daniel had mentioned, is you know, one way, it's one language, one opportunity to explore our relationship with the wilderness, and perhaps the meditation will serve as a prompt for your next journey into a natural space that you love, or that you are coming to love or coming to learn. We hope that that journey and your future outings will deepen your connection with the non-human world and remind you that you belong to the wilderness. Okay, Kathy, it's all yours.
Thank you, Sylvia. So I'm going to do a guided meditation, about 2 minutes or so, and then I'll give you a couple of questions to think about, and about 4 minutes to write. And then if you would like, we can share. So close your eyes and place yourself in a landscape or on land that you love and settle into it. Feel it beneath you. Now that you're settled, find your breath. Check in with your senses. In that landscape that you love, be aware of all that surrounds you. In this moment, I am breathing. In this moment, I am breathing. In this moment, I have space and time. In this moment, I have space and time. In this moment, I can listen to myself. In this moment, I can listen to the sounds of this moment. In this moment, I can listen to my feelings. In this moment, I can listen to sensations. In this moment, I can listen to thoughts. In this moment, I can listen without reacting. In this moment, I can listen without needing to do something. In this moment, I can let go and receive. In this moment, I can let go in order to take the next breath. In this moment, I can let go and make room. So I'd like you to come back to your breath and slowly move yourself away from that place you love and come back to our virtual world. And we're going to spend about 4 minutes doing some writing. If it's poetry, it's poetry. It can be anything. What I'd like you to think about, however it winds up in there, and it doesn't necessarily have to. These are just some things to think about. Where did you go? What did you notice? Where in your body did you feel it? And what did it evoke? So where did you go? What did you notice? Where in the body did you feel it? And what did it evoke? Get started. Our poetry activity. And we have about 5 minutes for any additional questions or conversation. And thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you and to do this.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you both. And Sophie, who's up there. You gonna do your poem, Sophie? I mean, she can
Thank
stop.
This is really fun. I kind of just wrote a bunch of words. It's not really a poem.
Well,
Remember, you can go back to it, Sophie, and it can be anything you want.
Sure. Well, I don't mind sharing, but I don't want to be recorded.
okay.
Well, I
I
just
would
wanted to
say-
thank everybody for being here and sharing this idea. I'm always trying to find other ways to communicate with people and to draw other people into the land and the landscape and make conservation more real. So this is certainly something, writing the land project is certainly something that we will consider
Great.
moving into as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for having us here. And everybody can be a poet on their own land. You don't need us to do that.
Right.